Kiani is an advisor to KITE. He served in the Foreign Service of Pakistan for more than 3 decades in various high-ranking positions, including Additional Foreign Secretary, Ambassador to Vietnam, Ambassador to Laos, and a High Commissioner of Malaysia. He has also been part of various Pakistani missions in Bangladesh, Canada, Nigeria, and the United Kingdom. He holds an MA in Political Science from the London School of Economics and an MA in Diplomatic Studies and International Law from the United Kingdom. He has also been part of the visiting faculty of several prestigious Pakistani universities, including NDU and the International Islamic University, amongst others. And with that, I'd like to hand the floor over to him to give his talk.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Honorable President, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, Ambassador Nagmana Hashmi, and distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. Today, 15th of December, is an extremely important day in my career and life. It is on the 15th of December 1980 that we joined the Civil Service Academy. And we are having a reunion today around 1 o'clock of the 1980 batch. Believe it or not, looks like the Red Man Winkle. We slept and got up, and our children had grown up and we had retired. Anyway, thank you very much, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, for inviting me. The topic today is Ladakh China. It means India Standoff. Now, this took place in 2020. Somewhere it started in March, and then it deteriorated till August of that same year. Now, this is, if you see the lecture, significance of demarcated boundaries. If you see how the boundaries are to be demarcated, the importance of that, what is the positivity of that. But then, these are the challenges of coexistence. These two countries, India and China, in spite of having fought war in this thing, they have to live, as they call it, the tyranny of geography. They have to coexist. If you look at these borders, now this is Aqsa Chin, and this is East Ladakh. And if I could take you back to when the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Ladakh was a division of the Jammu and Kashmir. Now, this is what happened during in 1962, the same thing happened, but this was in a smaller way, the Aqsa Chin. These are the Galwan Valley, Pangong Tso Lake, and Demchok. But this is exactly Pangong Tso Lake where the conflict happened. And this area is controlled by India and claimed by China, this one. And this is where it is written controlled by China and claimed by India. These are disputes. And this is the importance that if you have demarcated boundaries like we have with China, then you don't have these problems. And you look at again, I just wanted to show you this, that this is the terrain of the borders between China and India. And this is, if you look at this, huge, massive borders of 3,400 kilometers disputed area. And if you look at Pakistan's, the LOC, the dispute with Pakistan is very small, 460. It's very minuscule. And this is what the borders are. Now, post independence blunder, and what blunder would be ignoring boundaries. It is widely said that good fences make good neighbors. If you go to United Kingdom, you will hear these words, that good fences make good neighbors. It is on this dictum that most states around the globe generally base their foreign policies. It's very important, leading them to accord very high priority to border demarcation, because this is the basis of any conflict or dispute with your neighbors. Now, the significance attached to maintenance, invariability, and sovereignty international borders. Thank you very much. यहाँ रख दो नीचे, ठीक है, okay, thank you. Now, attached to invariability and sovereignty of international borders, it's extremely important that one should not ignore these things. This act, now, once you have a demarcated boundaries, then the act rewards states with irritant-free relationship, which India and China unfortunately do not have, with their neighbors, also reflecting realities and compulsions of coexistence. You have to coexist. You cannot take your borders anywhere. India and Pakistan, and just giving example of Pakistan and Afghanistan, or Pakistan and Iran, with our borders, we have to coexist. We have to find a way out to live together. Right at the outset of independence, 47, this sagaciousness, regretfully, this wisdom, somehow escaped the leadership of India, led by a Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, one of leading stalwarts of independence movement. After Quaid-e-Azam and Mahatma Gandhi, you can see Jawaharlal Nehru, a stalwart. One cannot dispute that he was one of the leaders of, and very well respected by the British and by our leaders also. India's desire for normal relations with China did not match his policies, as his neighbors had reflected in what? Leadership's according low priority to boundary demarcation with China. It is said, I've read so many books, that there was some sort of haughtiness on the part of Nehru, being a stalwart, independent stalwart, and a left-leaning leader, and highly nationalist. He had a haughty attitude, and he took it for granted that you see that he is a leader, and then he can just take China for granted. It was no surprise that history has not been kind to India and its leadership for having unnecessarily, meaning there was no need, drag boundary demarcation issue. If the issue was tackled at the right time, painful fallout, accompanying criticism both in India and abroad could have been avoided. Believe it or not, all academics, barring aside, if you look at the present scenario in which United States and China are at odds, and the whole the Western world is, because of economic reasons, try to ignore what India is doing, but academics and the historians do not have a good word for India for having ignored this thing, meaning it could have sat down with China and tackled this issue. Reflecting prudence on demarcating borders, reflecting prudence, and I'll show you what prudence was there. Zhou Enlai in 1962, April, proposed to Indian counterpart Nehru comprehensive settlement of boundary demarcation. Look at the large-heartedness of China, an east-west territorial swap in which Chinese control over Aksai Chin, which I've shown you, which is now some sort of Ladakh, Indian control of southern slope of Himalayas was to be acknowledged. Now this is a swap which they gave. They said, this is, you take this and we'll take this and close this irritant. Not surprisingly, Nehru rejected the offer. As I said to you earlier, his haughtiness, taking for granted. Consequently, India's political wrangling over demarcation of its border with China, its mishandling of Tibet issue. Now, let me show you what Tibet issue was. Tibet, we are not going to get into the historical fact. China, after the revolutionary government came in 1949 October, took control of these areas. And the Tibet, the Dalai Lama fled China and took refuge in India. The Indians should have been very careful in handling this thing. It's not saying that they should hand Dalai Lama back to China, but they should hand it. And again, the Indian leadership took China for granted and took it lightly, the sovereignty, the issue of sovereignty. Oh, sorry. Now, cascaded, leading two countries going to war in October 62, Mao Zedong was very, very upset. And the Indians didn't realize it's a revolutionary government. What the Chinese were doing, I think it's a lesson we should learn. They were trying to have a peaceful borders so that they could focus inside China. After the revolution, after thousands of years of imperial and hundreds of years of colonial rule, they wanted to focus inside the country, but they wanted to first of all, demarcate the border so they can focus inside. The Indians couldn't understand this thing. Indian experiencing a most humiliating defeat. Prime Minister Nehru never recovered from the humiliation. I read an interview of Indira Gandhi, her daughter, and he said that my father never recovered from it. He went down. It was the humiliation. The Indians, it's on record, Jaswant Singh, one of the defense minister, wrote that the Indians read that the ceasefire has been agreed to in the newspapers. The Chinese foreign ministry people went to the Indian embassy to tell them that there's a ceasefire now. So the humiliation. Basis of mistrust. Now, naturally speaking, mistrust was laid. India continues to carry its avoidable baggage. They could have avoided it. And has longest unsettled land border in the world, even after more than 7 decades of independence. This issue has not been resolved even now, even though this has been contained, this Ladakh standoff has been contained, but it's not gone. It's now well known that revolutionary China's total preoccupation was with settled boundaries. Total focus. India's relative indifference to borders in itself a lesson in statecraft. To be emulated by other states in peril means other states should never try to copy what Indians have done. This is something which is very, very embarrassing and dangerous. This topic continues. Compared to Pakistan's relation with China in the early 50s, it's a fact. India had far better ties with China, but history records that Pakistan had better wisdom. What brought China and India together was Nehru's left-leaning policies, ultra-nationalist Nehru, and even then Chinese were the same. But Pakistan was a smaller country, but Pakistan had better wisdom. So when people criticize Pakistan foreign policy, criticize Pakistan foreign service officers, they don't realize that whatever leeway or elbow room we had, we used it with wisdom. Thus reflecting foresight, shrewdness, Pakistan, another of China's neighbors in March 1961, formally approached China to negotiate a border agreement. Now, this was the period in which the Indians were vacillating, and Chinese, with great wisdom, had approached them, while we had looked at the short period in which we responded. China, what I have read is, Ambassador Nagwana Ashmi is here, that President Ayub Khan was given a map, and in which he saw that there was certain problem between China and India. He immediately asked his leadership from the Foreign Office that kindly approach China and get this thing settled. China responded most favorably, and both states agreed on a formula of mutual accommodation, meaning give and take. This was done, ironically, 9 days before Sino-Indian border clash of 62. Pakistan-China agreement signed March 63. I think it was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto who signed the agreement at that time. So this was the wisdom and prudence. Now, here the basis of Indian relationship, mistrust. Here the relationship of trust. Things close now, irritant-free relationship. This agreement put an end to any small or big acrimony which could have arisen in future between Pakistan and China. Decades of continuing strong bilateral relationship reflected that border demarcation was solid basis for bilateral trust. And this is the edifice on which a huge building has been constructed. Now, LOC and LAC, difference and significance. India and China have not been able to agree on international borders, even after lapse of 7 decades of war and peace. Even now, that 1993 agreement, which was signed, if I'm not wrong, when Rajiv Gandhi was the Prime Minister, between China and India, even though they signed an agreement, but even now, there is no formal agreement as such as to where the borders could be. One opinion is that an ill-defined 3,440 kilometers long disputed border. It is on the problem is such that countries' borders are on land or on mountains, but there is a problem on the lake also. rivers, lakes, snow caps, and other beliefs. Now, if you see geographically, any scientist can tell you, rivers, lakes, and snow caps, they keep on changing. The rivers meander, sometimes it dries up, goes somewhere else. Other belief is absence of clear border demarcation along frontier means this line can shift, bringing soldiers to face at many points, which at times provoke confrontation. Now, this has happened and continue to happen. But there is another fact. Chinese are very clear where their border is. The Indians are not. After 62 Sino-India conflict, this was a very, very embarrassing for India. It still remains. China was able to assert its control of disputed territory, particularly in Ladakh. And I said to you, Ladakh at that time was part of the occupied Jammu and Kashmir, was a division of India. Thus came concept of line of actual control, LAC, mentioned in bilateral agreement 1993. This was sort of a agreement of two countries who had to coexist. And they left minor things. But Chinese, even now, I had a word with the Chinese ambassador, said, we were very clear where we stood. It was the Indians who were vacillating. Before 2020, the standoff, last shot that was fired in anger was on Nathu-La border in 1967. More than 50 years ago, series of border clashes between China and India alongside border Himalayan kingdom Sikkim. If you look at the map, of Sikkim, Sikkim is now part of the Indian Federation. If you see Bhutan, Sikkim, all these are small. There is also a problem of demarcation in that area, and another very interesting thing has happened, that on the problems of a border dispute between Bhutan and India, Bhutan and China, Indians, for no rhyme or reason, had tried to play a big brother role, which for Chinese is unacceptable. And in the last, meaning 1 year or so, there has been some movement on the part of Bhutan and China, because they do not have diplomatic representation, that they are trying to patch up. Therefore, no surprise that Tansen Sen, a regional expert, looking at 2020 China-India standoff, was very close to reality when he commented, and I quote, unresolved border issue between China and India is no doubt a major hurdle that needs to be crossed over before substantial confidence is built between people of two countries, unquote. In the context of 2020 standoff between China and India, it may be important to understand differences of legal distinction between line of control between Pakistan and India and line of actual control of China and India. If you look at this line of control, you see it has been, as we go from, I will show you, this has been accepted. It was signed in the similar agreement between Indira Gandhi and President Bhutto at that time. And as such, there is no dispute. A dispute is in the Indian occupied Kashmir, but on the borders, there is more or less an agreement that yes, this is exactly where our troops in 1971, after the 71 war. But for the actual control India, this is some sort of a written and a verbal agreement. Generally accepted, LAC is line that serves the international border between India and China. If you look at academics, by and large, will say this is the border. LAC linked the international frontier with three main sectors: Eastern Sikkim, Western Ladakh. This is where the problem held, and the problem took place, the standoff in Eastern Ladakh and Central Nepal, each having peculiar legal features. If you look at there, they say there are 8 fingers going down. I think 4 fingers are with or 5 fingers are with China, and the other fingers are with India. Indian position of border is surprising, contradictory in all 3 sectors, whereas China has implemented consistent policy to assert executive authority of its government over chunks of land it claims along length. Now, this is what Chinese have their local governments and others. They are clear as a daylight that this is our. But for the Indians, is still they're disputed. On one other side, LOC, dividing India and Pakistan, set up a complete different legal context and not an issue merely of bilateral nature. LOC is legal outcome of Chapter 6-7 framework under UN Charter chapter. Given presence of United Nations military observers groups in India and Pakistan, legal basis environmental LOC are distinguished from LOC. So for these, whenever now, luckily for the last 1 year, there has been no skirmish or firing across LOC. But whenever it happens, the UNIVOC people exactly know where Pakistan, China LOC is, and they would go and try to resolve that. So now, if you look at this, these are the Chinese soldiers on the border, the Indian soldiers. If you see, these are the discussion going on during this problem. These are, if you could see, officers of China and India talking to each other. Here also, the Ladakh standoff. And let me share you one thing. The Chinese official documents are very clear. They've been encouraging their soldiers, officers in the LAC to talk to the Indian officers and try to resolve the issue. They have been very clear about that, unlike what the Indians have been doing. Now, background to Modi's avocation of Article 317, carving out disputed Ladakh as a separate territory, miscalculation, disastrous consequences intertwined. May 2019, Chinese forces objected to Indian road construction in Galwan River Valley. You see, they have been constructing roads, and they're making bridges, they've been doing all sorts of things. The Chinese are watching them very carefully. Now, it is an understanding that even India and Pakistan, if you see on the occupied Kashmir, the LOC, if there is some movement, they would first forewarn or inform the Indian counterpart that we have some sort of a movement. But the Indians took it for granted that they can build bridges and do everything. And this was of concern to India, for example, because of the northern part of the northern areas of Pakistan and their own border. They were very apprehensive that the Indians are doing something which is against the law. Chinese Indian troops engaged in aggressive melee face-off, skirmishes at locations along Sino-Indian border, including near disputed Panam Lake in Ladakh. Now, this is slowly and steadily, these things cascaded. These clashes caused multiple deaths on both sides, more Indian side. 20 soldiers lost their lives. Now, something which they could have avoided. Loss of life, Indian, Chinese soldiers, loss of face. You see, a country which says it is I'm not calling regional hegemon, but a regional power, is emerging regional power, could have avoided this thing. It was again a bloody face the Indian had to take. If Modi's led government had carried out what? Desired discussion internally, both within political circles, military leadership, diplomatic exchanges with government of India. I was reading a very nice article on the death of the Chief of Defense Staff, Bipin Rawat, that he had conducted a high-level inquiry and he had held 2 lieutenant generals in the LAC responsible for the skirmishes. He said this could have been avoided. But there are other side also, they said that he was the Chief of Army Staff at that time. Was he consulted? And according to some sources, he was not consulted. And they themselves, on their own, the Indian government sent the troops, asked directly the commanders to lead the troops inside. Subsequent events proved that Indian created disaster was leading to ill-planned constitutional remodeling of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, which is executed in August 2019. Indian government argument, which has no legs to stand on, stated, and I quote, "This is a long overdue measure that will help to stabilize the situation by integrating the state into India," unquote. They didn't realize something important. Jammu and Kashmir itself, with the Ladakh, is a disputed part with even China. Why has China been quiet? China has been looking at that whenever this disputes, this is settled, then China would be talking to India and Pakistan both to find out how the borders to be demarcated. They only looked within the those prisoners within the Indian occupied Kashmir and looked at us, that these are the two parties, so they can just ignore them. They didn't realize that it is China also part and parcel of this issue. India's haughtiness was obstacle to Prime Minister Modi, his close advisors, foresight. They forgot that China was too part of disputed Kashmir territory, and carving out Ladakh from occupied J&K into Union territory would invite Indian aggression. There is on the website, if you look at the Foreign Office, Chinese, they said very clearly that they had forewarned, they had told the Indians that Ladakh remains a disputed part. For no rhyme or reason, they mean it is still to be settled. They could not have carved out without consulting China. India's ambition to graduate to exclusive club of permanent category in the United Nations Security Council, you see the arrogance, goes against very grain of the UN principles. You cannot become part of this special, status of without knowing, which calls for all member states for strict adherence. In this case, UN Resolution 47 on 2020 called for a plebiscite. You cannot ignore the principles of the United Nations and still become ambitious to become a permanent member. Now this is Quad. I'll show you why. Now these are the new, I would say, the supporters of India. Now, again, miscalculation on part of India that, okay, these are your supporters, but in case of any conflict, there will be no boots on ground. So you don't get carried away. The China-India standoff, an external factor. Indian non-alignment farce continued unabated. In my opinion, after the demise of Nehru in 1964, the non-alignment farce had already gone out. Even during the period 1962 war of China-India, Nehru had written a letter to, at that time, President Kennedy, requesting for assistance because of the war with China. Even at that time, the non-alignment had just gone away. But after the demise of Nehru, when it was taking meaning, it had no relevance. Till it came out in open with President Trump declaring India as a strategic partner. So this was a farce. Bush administration oft-repeated emphasis on nuclear proliferation had to take a nose down when in 2005, US entered into civil nuclear agreement. 2006 amendment was made to US law to exempt trade with non. I think maybe Nadeem, you were here in 2005? I was here. I remember President Musharraf and President Bush, he was there for one night, we're going to India. And a press conference was being held and he was asked that, somebody asked him, why not with Pakistan? He said, no. Pakistan different. Even though we were fighting, biggest support was Pakistan in their war against in Afghanistan. But this is what double standards are. So this is a farce of the non-alignment. India showcased itself as a new strategic partner for US in this region, which meant it portrayed itself as a counterweight to China. Now, there's another big laughter in this region. As a new strategic partner to US, India wanted to have its stakes in Afghanistan, Indian Ocean, and beyond. Where people say that the United States had supported India in Afghanistan, but believe it or not, Trump joked and he said, apart from giving them some sort of mobility in NGOs, they didn't give them any big role. China's reaction was at variance to contents US to contain China and sabotage regional peace and stability. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman stated, you see the wisdom, quote, we need to ensure that Asia-Pacific is stage for China and US to enhance mutually beneficial cooperation. It should not become an arena where a zero-sum game plays out. So this is wisdom, and they reacted in a very cautious manner. India's experience of conflict with China, from August 62 to 2017, Doklam, again in the same area, confrontation, does not seem to have made the leadership any wiser. It blindly in June 20 waded into brief bloody confrontation in disputed Ladakh region. In brief, Modi government got unnecessarily carried away by external factors. I said to you, all these external actors supporting them. who never had any intention to support India with the boots on the ground. India had to fight its wars, which had always lost. So this is something that Indians should have seen, that, okay, they are supporting you, okay, politically, but you have to fight your own wars, and the past is something which you need to look at. It is said that military relations are the most difficult to get right and most likely to lead to catastrophic consequences if leaders mismanage them. India did mismanage them, if you look at this. China border, this is, I will quickly go. This is something very, a development which took place about maybe few months back, that in the Chinese leadership continues to accord utmost priority to sovereignty of its territory, on which there was to be no compromise, but remaining open to negotiating border issues with its neighbors, which is to ensure maintenance, peace and borders. While Indians, on the border with China, there is very sparse population, and even then it is not very well maintained. But Chinese have now carried out reforms, and what they have done is that to unsettled border, brief conflict remain matter of serious concern, which obviously contain conflict spirit of coexistence. Unsettled borders and the non-brief conflict, both the countries are contained. I think it's more on the Chinese side that contained in the spirit of coexistence. Land border law is just October 23, and the Chinese Parliament, the National Congress, has passed a law stipulates that sovereignty, integrity is sacred, inviolable, and that states should take measures to safeguard integrity and land boundaries and guard against combat. Now, what they have done is they have settled the people there. They have some local governments. They are trying to help and assist in the town, so that it is a message to the Indians that these are our people. This is our border. Here the border ends. Law stipulates China can't close the border. The war or other conflict threatens border security. Significant aspect of new law includes state support for construction of border towns, improving their functioning and strengthening border. There has been a mute criticism by India of this. As expected, India reacted to new Chinese legislation termed as unilateral decision by China to bring about new land border law. Added, it's a matter of concern as the legislation can have implications on existing bilateral pacts on border management over our border division. So a very muted response by the Indians. And that is also, as I said to you, the spirit of coexistence. Managing challenges of coexistence. It could seem very odd that China, having fought very brutal war with India many decades back, and subsequent to a smaller conflict should have maturity and sagacity to reach out to India to contain deteriorating relationship. This happened in backdrop 2022 standoff, disputed Ladakh region. So even the Chinese have been very, very clever, very sagacious, and as usual, they have been very clever to contain in the spirit of coexistence. Apart from China and India being regional rival, significance of tyranny of geography means it's something which you have not hoped for. Meaning you cannot do it. It's like this, that you have a neighbor and you have to live with them. Has forced two countries who share long, arduous border, has always guided sagacious Chinese leadership, its diplomats. Guide Chinese policy in India, notwithstanding Indian off and on. And coexistence is also with its border. It has serious border problems with Russia. But in the spirit of coexistence, they have put this thing in the back burner. During thick of 2020 standoff, Chinese ambassador to India. Now, this is right on day 2nd or 3rd. And he's the same man who was ambassador in Pakistan, Mr. Lu. While addressing a function in New Delhi, what did he say? Both countries should seek understanding through communication and constantly resolve differences. So this is the basis of coexistence, trying to contain that problem. Spirit of coexistence record of formal, informal summit shows President Xi and PM Modi have met at least 8 times in 2014. PM Modi visited China 5 times, most by an Indian Prime Minister in the last 7 decades. President Xi and Prime Minister Modi dialogue in informal summits at each other's countries has special significance in the context of preserving peace between China and India, abiding by realities of geography, geopolitics, in brief, compulsions of coexistence. So these are, even though they have fought wars, they continue to have problems, but both the leaders have tried to to meet each other. It's just like in the Cold War, the Soviet Union and the United States leadership used to meet at different places, trying to understand each other, trying to contain, because both were nuclear powers. Same is the case with China and India. Here you see this is an informal meeting. If I'm not wrong, I think this is either India or China. I don't know, but this is where both the meetings. You can see it is an informal discussion going on between the two leaders. Now, Christoph, looking into the future, what does the future say? Looking at crystal ball of China-India relations, soothsayers do not bode well. They do not, have good ideas. One cannot blame oracles whose choice is limited. On one side, China, led by highly erudite leadership, and India's leadership is shaped by the ruling BJP's ideological zealotry and extremism, borders on fascism and ultra-nationalism. The Chinese revolutionaries fought with their blood against Chinese or Japanese occupiers. Fascism is something which the Chinese are against, they fought against, and now this is coming up in India. Prudence demand that India, which does not enjoy cordial relations with most of its neighbors, shed its aggressive regional ambitions. It does not have good or normal relations with any of its neighbors. For once, decide not to punch above its weight to build a sustainable process that minimizes the risk of war. Because war is something the Chinese and the region can ill afford. Would India ignore regional bidding? I mean, people are saying that these, be cool, become practical. We demand that it should take the initiative, finally agree on border demarcation, finally, and which can contribute for these two states to finally live like normal neighbors. They shall call India to bury once and for all the border of ghost. Jia Kumar Sharma, well-respected Indian expert of regions, added his sane voice to the recurrence of such conflict and advises country leadership, among other steps, it should take to avoid external voices, means people telling them, you see, you're a leader or this and that, and then New Delhi must tread this path cautiously. The new Cold War, if ever becomes a reality, would be completely different from Cold War 20th century. Need to avoid this pitfall. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm most willing to answer.
Shiraz is my name, and I'm from Radio Pakistan.
I've met you a few times.
Yeah. My question is that, you said that the Chief of Army Staff actually kind of did not know, or he was not really, he did not know that he was not really willing to send the troops to Ladakh for the conflict between the two countries, and still the government actually sent the troops. It means the Chief of Army Staff actually did not know, or he never was concerned, or he was not really contacted for. It means that there's something, the government of India and the military are not on the same page, kind of a thing.
Let me just clarify. What I have read by the Indian sources are more important. That the Chief of Army Staff was literally forced, right at the 11th hour. What they were telling them was, no, this is, you see, the commanding officer of a unit, he was a lieutenant colonel who was told to go into as a patrolling. He had 10 soldiers with him, 9 soldiers, and he was the 10th one. They went to an area where they should not have gone. But this was an area, and they were literally thrown into the water by the Chinese. The Chief of Army Staff at that time did not know that this is what is going to happen, and there was some sort of a disconnect between the political government and the military leadership. And that is why later on, when the things went out of control, the late Chief of Defense Staff held an inquiry and held 2 lieutenant generals responsible, because this thing started somewhere in March, April, and cascaded into August when things went very bad. And he said that this should have been contained. According to reports, they were not on the same page. The military leadership did not want this skirmish, and they said very clearly that we are not ready. We are not ready for a war. We want to, and that is the reason that after this skirmish, when I think this 20 Indians died, and I think there were 4 or 5 Chinese soldiers also died. No weapons were used, sticks, and basically these Indian soldiers were all thrown into the icy water and they died. The Chinese leadership told the military leadership that you should try to contain this thing and talk to the Indians. And if you see this, I've showed you photos. But the Indians did not have a clear message. But the Chinese are very clear that you stay wherever you are and don't go beyond a certain thing. But do not allow the Indians to come in. It's unfortunate. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah, now the problem is the Prime Minister Modi's government, which is arrogant. He is not willing to accept, and they have kept this thing down. But the late Chief of Defense Staff had held an inquiry, and they said that there's a conspiracy theory is going on, that there was some maybe within the Indian Armed Forces, people had brought him down, because if this would have opened up a Pandora box of the senior leadership having mismanaged this skirmish. But then you cannot absolve the political leadership. How can they have allowed these people to go into a disputed territory? No reason. They could have sat down. It cascaded after they were building these roads and bridges and all this thing there. The Chinese became alarmed. So what are they doing? Some of the roads were being built within the Indian territory. But since they were so close to the Chinese border, that the Chinese had said they could have consulted us. No, nobody knows why, but the Chinese got alarmed that this is, and yes, it is part of the northern area also, part of the CPAC. So they also were quite worried. Sorry.
Thank you very much for a very nice presentation. I just had a few comments to make. I'm sure the participants here have really benefited from a very detailed view of history. But I just had a few points to begin with. I think it was not just Nehru's haughtiness. I think there was strategic planning behind it. For a very simple reason, they would never have agreed to the swap agreement, proposal being that was put forward by China, because if they did that, then they would lose the only access they have to Siachen, and the reason that they're making the roads and everything, and they would lose access to Tibet. That is why this area is so important to them, and that is why this area is also important for us, and because it's that chicken neck area that gives them access to Siachen. There's no other way that they can go to Siachen. That's why they're making the roads, they're making the
I agree.
So that is one thing. So I think we have no love lost with India, and certainly none with Nehru, but I think there was a strategic thinking behind there. Secondly, the area that is now being controlled by India was actually taken by China in the 1962 war, but they voluntarily withdrew from that area and came back to the middle of the they came back to the middle of the river. And thirdly, I think what I wanted to say was that Modi probably miscalculated the strength of China.
I said it.
Yeah. They thought that maybe China was going through the pandemic, and there was a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of Western pressure too. So maybe this is the time to take advantage. They did not realize that there is a lot of difference between the PLA of 1962 and the PLA of today. And it's a very modern, very equipped and agile PLA. They have the best of equipment and the best of morale. It's a rising power. So their soldiers are very upbeat about it, a lot of nationalism coming in. While if you look at India, you see the state of their armed forces. So there's really, it was no match at all. And I think Modi miscalculated. So the reluctance on the part of their army was right. But it was probably Modi's
Yes, that's exactly what I've said.
overconfidence, not realizing that China would never allow this. And I think it's China's sagacity that it didn't get out of hand. Otherwise, it would have definitely gone out of hand. And one last comment about the border dispute. China has no border dispute with anybody else now, the land border dispute with nobody except India. And in our case, we were in the beginning apprehensive about China. We had even offered India, a joint defense pact, and Nehru asked us against whom.
Historically.
And so that's also part of history. But on the border dispute, China was really very, very frustrated with India because they really wanted to, as you had very rightly said, be at ease so they could concentrate on the internal developments. But it was at this time that Mr. Bhutto had written to his counterpart saying that we'd like to settle the border dispute. And immediately the reply came from their foreign minister saying, on what conditions? And it was there that Bhutto wrote, it's a handwritten letter that he wrote back to them saying on 3 principles: international principles that govern international border disputes by peaceful negotiations and mutual trust. And it is these 3 things that really stood in contrast with the Indian attitude. And you very rightly said that the border dispute got settled in 3 to 4 months. And this actually became, the foundations were already being laid, but this really became the cornerstone for developing our relationship forward and giving that trust to each other. So I think this area is very important. I just wish China had not voluntarily withdrawn from that.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ambassador Nagwana, grateful to you. You see, in a 30 minutes presentation, I could have said this thing. Otherwise, it's a very. Let me share with you. There is a dispute between China and Russia still exists, but on the border, yes, and they've kept it on the back burner, but not of the magnitude. There was the Yula, if I'm not wrong, Yuri River or some on which they fought. And this was, let me just share with you something with the permission of the President, Honorable President. This was the trigger which called for President Nixon in 1970 to talk to the Henry Kissinger secretary and said, this is the time to divide the communist world, the super. I would just like to, because my lecture is, because of, I have read maybe 4 to 5 books, parts of the books. I just want to quote with the permission of the President, Jaswant Singh, the late Jaswant Singh, a former soldier and a very, very shrewd politician of the BJP. He said about this 62 war, he said that his country ignored its peril, and I quote, the hard-headed pragmatism of Mao Zedong, Marshal Chen Yi, and Premier Zhou Enlai, that India approached the immediate post-independence years fired by the zeal of an idealist, unquote. I mean, they didn't realize that a revolutionary government like China would like to, first of all, settle its border disputes once and for all and focus within the country. They didn't realize that, and then they paid a very heavy price for it. So thank you very much for adding. Please.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Nabila Jaffa. I'm a research analyst at the Institute. Thank you very much for such an insightful presentation. 2 very important incidents happened. Like one was in 2019, the revocation of Article 370 which actually put BJP on a very high political pedestal at domestic level. Like
Domestic.
there was some positive, perception because that was their election promise in since 2014. When this humiliation, like Indian forces faced this humiliation at the hands of Chinese forces because and they maintained their, assertive control on that territory even during those clashes. So, how do you view public perceptions in India against China after Ladakh clashes, and how do you view the public perception about BJP's handling of that clashes with China?
Since the coming of the BJP, their election, if you look at the elections which are taking place in Pakistan and in India, you compare. In Pakistan, domestic issues have been like food, water, education, inflation. These are the things which have been. India has never been part and parcel of these election campaigns or of the. But in India, these are vote catching things. China will not get them many votes, I'm telling you, because they know the history of being whipped, not once, twice, thrice. So they look at Pakistan as a whipping boy and they try to get votes. Revocation of Article 370 is part and parcel of the BJP's manifesto. People don't realize. People take it easy. No, this is in a manifesto. They will not do it. They do it. Jan Sangh people, these are people, if you look at, there is a book of Advani, My Life, My Country. If you read that book, it's a big book. They are committed to revocation of this article. They consider it part and parcel of India. We have, the United Nations accepts this is a disputed issue which needs to be resolved by a plebiscite. So then India has been looking at Pakistan naturally, relatively, economically weak. We have internal problems, and they said that, okay, what we can do is, remove this article and end it and bring it together. They're facing serious problems. 1 million troops in the Indian occupied Kashmir. But by and large, the Hindu population, which are in majority, they were happy. The Hindutva, and those who did not agree, there are millions of Hindus who do not agree with what they have done, but they were browbeaten. They continue to be browbeaten. So this is but the first miscalculation the Indian government did was to ignore China, which China is part and parcel of this Ladakh dispute. They have been quiet. If you look at the agreement which was signed between Pakistan and China, when the Jammu Kashmir dispute is ended, then they will talk to Pakistan also. Yeah. But with Pakistan, they understand give and take, and this is resolved. But with Indians, the arrogance, you see, their arrogance is a continuous, what you call part. Barring aside Vajpayee, who was a very pragmatic BJP leader, the rest have been, and Modi is one of the worst, the leader who doesn't understand the spirit of coexistence. You have to coexist the tyranny of geography.
My name is Imran. I'm a researcher here. Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. So one thing is established that there is no war between China and India is going to happen. There might be some skirmishes on the border.
Very right.
So whenever there are skirmishes on the border, so Pakistan feels the heat. So
Pakistan
feels the heat, and it disturbs the balance between Pakistan and Indian border. So my question is how we can navigate through India-China standoff in the future and maintain a peaceful coexistence and maintain a regional balance, Pakistan-India border balance. So how can we navigate through this?
You see, when these skirmishes took place, Pakistan's the statements were very cautious. We don't get, I don't think the government of Pakistan or military or the political leadership becomes very happy. I don't think so. Because this is not 1960, this is 2020, 21, where people are scared that this may escalate. This has to be contained. But we understand, we know the leadership, knows the military leadership, that Indian political leadership is far more, you see, irrational than the military. The Indian military is professional forces. They understand that they cannot fight this war. I want to quote to you, it was, I think, 2017 or 2016, Jane, there's a military magazine, Jane, in which an American observer was called to see a firepower exercise taking place in India, in China. He was given a bunker many miles away and to watch. And he was there for 3-4 days. And he writes that after the second day, he was writing, taking notes. He said that I would advise even the United States or neighboring countries to just stay away from China. The brute force, the outstanding, the way the exercise was conducted, and the weapons they were using. And as he said that, the Chinese, Deng Xiaoping had reduced the army and put all these soldiers in the factories. They have a lean army. They have a huge army, but lean and very effective. So the Indians should understand they cannot fight this war. Not today, not in 100 years. They have a professional army. Okay, it's a regional power. It's trying to, but the way it acts is very, very irrational. So I don't think the government of Pakistan, the military leadership, becomes very happy if these two fight. I think we would like to contain what they are doing. We would like that these people could sit and but at the same time, if India remains focused on its problem with China, I think we are in a little better. We don't want it to escalate, but remains contained, that its focus remains away from us. Sir. Sir, thank you. I don't think it will be a flashpoint. My opinion is there's Chinese more, because Ambassador Narman Hashmi is here. Chinese are very, very rational. I don't think they would like a repeat of what has happened. But the problem Chinese are finding is that the Indians are not willing to sit across the table with their political leadership. Forget the military leadership. They keep on meeting again and again to sit in the spirit of coexistence and try to resolve this issue. I have read the Indians, I have got these things, read it. The Indians are the newspaper people who can go to the borders and write. I don't think they're giving them the right picture. Chinese are willing to sit down together. And because this is not an easy line of actual control, is not an easy border, with, as I told you, lakes and rivers and mountains. But they can sit down together. It will take them maybe 1 or 2 years to delineate the border and sign and sit down together and resolve. So my own opinion is that, but there's another thing. If you look at what has happened in Pakistan, China and India, we have downgraded the relationship between China and Pakistan and India. Whereas the diplomatic relationship between India and China remains the same. They've been sitting across the table, military leadership, political leadership, diplomatic leadership, defense minister, national security, across the table. Why? Try to contain the skirmish and try to contain and to live in spirit of coexistence. Chinese are far more, going front to talk to them. When Indians have responded, Indians know their weakness. They can't fight any wars. I don't think there will be any senior skirmish. Might be this one a small thing will continue, but both the countries are nuclear powers, and any miscalculation. Yesterday there was a very interesting at Marriott, and they said that in this age of technology, God forbid, they can be a small in a miscalculation on the part of nuclear powers.
Thank you, sir. I just have a comment. Normally, when we talk of this India-China skirmish or conflict, we actually look into it as to what it has for Pakistan, implications of Pakistan. Before that, when we talk of 1962 war,
I didn't say that. It's one of them.
this is my opinion. When we talk of 1962 war, most of the people who look at international relations, or if you consider international relation considerations of a relationship, we see that we were advantaged by conflict in 1962. We came closer to China, and then we built on, and we had cordial relations with China, and the relation grew from strength to strength. I was unclear because when I was talking to Chinese scholars, they were unclear as to what are their military objectives in Galwan Valley when they did it. Probably they wanted to go to a point. They wanted Indian army or Indian leadership to know that we can do this, and they stopped short of what we expect. We actually wished that China should push forward, so that because we look at this issue from the point of view that it will ignite maybe Kashmir issue. China becomes also a partner in the Kashmir issue. It becomes part of the issue, and then it may get strengthened by Chinese involvement. Like when China says, no, the Kashmir issue is not a bilateral issue, or it's we are a fourth party also in this. Given the fact that Chinese are not going to fight, there's no all-out war expected between China and India. And they also play very cautiously in Galwan and in Sikkim area. And like we expected, the trade between India and China going down drastically, but it didn't. You know, they were fighting in Galwan Valley.
Yes.
And they were trading also with each other. Trade figures just came down for 2-3 weeks, but then again, you know, they picked up pace. So they're very wise, as you said rightly. That. So what should we expect as Pakistani? How can we take advantage of the situation, or how can we not play up because it's the wrong term to use? How can, you know, what this has implication for Pakistan, and how can we take advantage of the situation in Galwan Valley? Thank you.
I just say 1 or 2 words before I come to your question. The book, China-India War, if you have read, it is a monumental book. I think his is something, and he does mention Pakistan very little, but he talks how the Indians. He spent more in China than in India. Second thing is, it was not China-India war that brought Pakistan together. I don't think so. 1963, the April, that was, I think, prudent part of Pakistan to have. Rather, if you read, wrote, I'm not wrong, telling him that the weapons which you are supplying to India used against us, definitely 1965 war. This is something we have, and we knew, even Ayub Khan, that India is not going to win this war. Third thing is that if you talk about the Kashmir being ignited, I can tell you the last time the Chinese boots on ground was in, after Korea, Chinese never ventured in any other country. It will be wishful thinking on the part of us that they might come and help us. I don't think so. Boots on ground they don't do, and otherwise they are there. They're supporting you. We had in a very prudent manner, we have shifted slowly and steadily from the United States being so much, you know, we beholden to them for defense, and at certain points they were not willing to give us the spares. But now we have, you know, between the two more with the China. My is that post Pulwama, if you look at the Prime Minister and the Army Chief, their statements were very, very cautious. against telling Indians that we are willing to sit with you and talk to you. So we are somebody who would be willing. Aggravation on their part can create problems for us. They might open up front here because they know they're going to lose with China.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ambassador Kiani, thank you for a very informative talk. You really covered the subject very well, and I think your NDO experience enabled you to do it in about 30-35 minutes.
Sir, thank you very much.
I'd like to just add that, just a personal touch to the entire thing that, during my first days when I went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at a lunch, I had the pleasure of meeting Ambassador Kiani. There was a tradition at that time at the Foreign Office. Am I right, Ambassador Nakmana, that we used to have a soup and a sandwich?
Yeah.
The first time
I remember. You're talking about
1986.
86,
87. And that is when I met Ambassador Kiani. And then Ambassador Kiani also was a very avid hiker and a cyclist. He's given it up. I don't know why.
My mentor.
But we spent some great times together. Ambassador, thank you very much.
Sir.
You really covered the subject very well. You gave us the history, you gave us your views, you quoted from various Indian and Chinese leaders. And I would like to request, is it possible for us to retain this presentation?
Yeah, please.
With your permission?
It's my honor. It's my
Okay.
honor.
And we'll give it to Imran, who looks after regional conflicts. Thank you very much. We were very much, the Institute is very obliged to you for sparing time and coming and talking to us and giving us your very frank views. With that, we come to the end of this presentation, and I would like to request all of you to accompany us to the rooftop where we will have some tea and samosas.
I will welcome that. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.